Hi folks, no lightsaber review today. Instead, I want to talk to you about Shawna Trpcic, who has very sadly passed away. To the fandom, Shauna was the costume designer behind Ahsoka, The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Firefly, Torchwood, Cabin in the Woods, Power Rangers, and so many more. To me, she was one of my dearest friends, my convention buddy. Somebody I could always rely on for support and inspiration. Monday night, she was texting me from her Desert Oasis hotel, super excited about the plans we were making to go to Disneyland for the Life Day festivities next month. 2 days later, I got the call. The last few days for me have been just a blur of grief. It still doesn't really seem real, and I know it's going to be a while before it really sinks in. Everyone grieves differently and at their own pace. Me, I grieve through sharing stories of the ones I love. So I want to tell you some stories about Shauna. What an amazing person she was and why so many of us are going to miss her so dearly. I first met Shauna in 2005 when the San Francisco Browncoats were running a charity raffle for our booth at San Diego Comic-Con. One of our members had reached out to her to see if she had a costume drawing or a scrap of fabric from one of the shows that she'd be willing to donate. In true Shauna fashion, instead, she said, "I've got 2 boxes of Firefly costumes in my garage. You can take one of those if you want." Who does that? Luckily, I was dating somebody who lived in LA at the time, so I was the one who got to go down and visit her to pick it up. When we got there, she showed us the 2 giant wardrobe boxes of costumes that she had loaned to the studio for Heart of Gold, Shindig, and a couple other episodes. My girlfriend at the time picked out the red dress from Shindig for us to use for the raffle. Before we knew it, Shauna was asking us if we wanted to stay for dinner, and that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Now, Shauna had been doing costume design for well over a decade by then, but she hadn't really been exposed much yet to the fandom side of things. My jaw hit the floor when I saw the original Mal coat just draped over the back of her couch, and the boxes of Firefly costumes she just had shoved in a corner in the garage. I told her how much fans would lose their minds to see this stuff up close, much less own it for themselves. I remember her being very surprised by this. "Really? They're just costumes." Oh, honey, no. You don't understand fans. So after the convention, I came back down again and photographed for her all of the costumes and jewelry and knickknacks that she had from Firefly, and we put them up for auction so they could go to the fans that we knew would love them. Except for the original Kaylee parasol, which we gave to Jewel State, because Jewel is amazing and deserves nice things. Needless to say, that auction was very popular among the Firefly fans, and the people who got those costumes were so happy to have them. The following year, my friend Amy and I organized the 2nd annual Browncoat Ball up in San Francisco. Shauna came up to join us, along with Jonathan Logan, who made the original Browncoat, as well as pretty much all of the leather you see in Buffy and Angel. Several of the auction winners wore those original Firefly costumes to our costume ball. Including me, I got to wear the Fess Higgins vest. And Shauna was absolutely glowing when she got to see her creations given a second life by the fans. It didn't take long for Shauna to fall completely head over heels in love with cosplayers and fandom. Over the years, I went with Shauna to a whole bunch of conventions. She called me her convention Sherpa as I guided her around and showed her all the ins and outs of fandom. More than anything in the world, Shauna loved seeing cosplayers dress up as the characters she designed. She would catch sight of a Jane hat across the crowd, or a group of Firefly cosplayers, and her face would just light up. She was a bit shy at first, but pretty soon she was going up to them and telling them how much she loved their costumes. It took a bit more prodding to get her to actually tell them who she was. She never thought anyone would care who the costume designer was, but every single time when she told them who she was, their eyes would just go wide with amazement when they realized who they were talking to. No matter how many times I saw that, it was always such a beautiful thing to witness. Over the past few days, I've seen so many of those cosplayers posting on social media their photos and their stories from meeting Shauna and how gracious and wonderful she was. I wish she was here to see it. I still remember when she went to Star Wars Night at Disneyland in 2022. She was there with her son Joseph, who, by the way, is a huge Star Wars fan. She spent 3 hours in line to get the new Ahsoka Tano Legacy lightsaber box set that had just come out. Meanwhile, I was 400 miles away, texting her to keep her company in line, while at the same time going on the Galaxy's Edge and our lightsabers discords, giving people updates and sending them over to chat her up while she was in line. It was so much fun. Little did I know that in addition to buying a set for Joseph, she was also buying a set for me, which she brought to work and had both Rosario and Dave sign for me and surprised me with as a gift later. It's the centerpiece of my little collection. And Shauna's love for the fandom was infectious. I remember in 2022 at Star Wars Celebration, her entire costume crew was running around the convention floor doing costume checks, fixing the costumes for all the cosplayers, just like they would do for the actors on set. She hadn't put them up to this. This was their own idea. She just filled her staff with people who loved Star Wars and the fandom and the cosplayers as much as she did, led by example, and the rest was history. Now, I am a huge Firefly fan, so getting to wear Mal's original brown coat before we auctioned it off was definitely a bucket list moment. But of all the costumes that Shauna designed, it was the Illyria costume that had the biggest impact on my life. One day while we were talking, Shauna told me that she had spotted the original Illyria outfit in a pile of stock that the costume house was getting ready to get rid of. I, of course, freaked out and told her she had to rescue it. So the next day, she went in, bought it off of the costume house, and I think I traded her an iMac for it. But I became the new owner of the Illyria costume, on a lark. I spent about 10 years as the custodian for that costume before passing it on to its current owner. In that time, I loaned it back to Shauna to bring to tons of conventions. I had my friend Amy pose in it and take pictures from every possible angle so that the cosplayers would have high-res reference material for making their own Illyria costumes, which is also what Georges Genti used as reference when he was drawing the Illyria comics. Fun fact. And I even let my friend Kelly run around San Diego Comic-Con dressed in the actual real costume one year, which pretty much made her con. But of course, the most fun I ever had with that costume was at BayCon in 2008, when I let this really cute girl that I had just met try it on for fun. A few years later, Shauna designed her wedding dress for us. Now, I'm not saying Illyria was the cause of my marriage, but it certainly didn't hurt. When Shauna landed the Mandalorian job, I had my friend Justin do a custom repaint of a Sabine action figure with Illyria's costume pattern and gave it to her as a gift, which she kept on her desk at work. It was a fun little throwback. Now, I doubt we would ever see anything like that in the show, given the licensing issues. But hey, a nerd can dream. Of course, things weren't always sunshine and roses for Shauna. When I met her in 2005, she was flying pretty high after a solid run on Angel and Firefly. She had a beautiful house, a loving and hilarious husband, a precocious 2-year-old Joseph, and a newborn Sarah. But the years following Firefly were pretty rough on her. She spent about as many years out of work as she did working. A lot of the projects she worked on were passion projects that didn't pay a lot, and she unfortunately lost her marriage and her house along the way. At one point, Shauna was very seriously considering giving up the entertainment industry altogether, moving to Sedona, Arizona, and opening an art studio. Thank goodness for all of Star Wars that didn't follow through. But through it all, Shauna was unbreakable. It was really tough for her at times, but she never lost her faith, literally or figuratively. She kept one foot in front of the other and always brought her optimism and her passion to everything she did. She gave her children a more loving and supportive life growing up in an RV park than most kids would get growing up in a palace. And even on the smallest, lowest paying jobs, she always brought her A game, bringing professional structure to every indie film, her own brilliant vision to every character, and treated every actor and every collaborator she met with love and reverence for who they were and what they brought to the table. I don't think there's anyone who has ever worked with Shauna who has anything but praise for her, as we're seeing in the news right now as everybody comes out of the woodwork to share their stories. Working with Shauna or just knowing Shauna is something you just never forget. So that brings us to Star Wars and the biggest lesson Shauna ever taught me. Rewind to May 31st, 2019. I'm sitting there at my desk at work and I get a text from Shauna. Top secret, it says. I have an interview next week and I need to know everything you know about Mandalorians. I was born for this moment. I'm ready. So I run downstairs, call her up, and after a few minutes of us just screaming, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, at each other, she fills me in on what's going on and what she needs to know. After work, I go home and I send her this huge, long Shauna's homework study guide email, including Mandalorian history videos from Star Wars Explained, Generation Tech, Sombraptor, and I think a couple others, a must-see episodes list for Clone Wars and Rebels, a ton of photos of cosplayers showing what they've done with Mandalorian costumes over the years, including a really cool group that did nothing but Disney characters as Mandalorians. Love that one. And even an article that I had written on Medium about how The Mandalorian could be about this random character from a book called Cobb Vanth, nobody had ever heard of. And of course I added bits about Sabine and Ahsoka and a few other characters, just in case. With that as a starting point, Shauna then spent the next 5 days doing her usual deep dive lore research, and was more than ready to ace her interview with John and Dave the following week. Needless to say, she got the job, parlayed that into spending literally the rest of her life immersed in the Star Wars universe, bringing every one of those characters and a whole lot more to live action. Talk about a bucket list moment. But my point in telling you this story is not just to relive the happy memories. I mean, I will, if you'll let me. I'll talk for hours. I'll tell you how amazing it was to get that I got the job call, to see her name up on screen on an actual Star Wars show, and almost getting the chance to be an extra on Star Wars before a stupid pandemic nixed that idea. But no, what I really want to talk to you about is how she got that job and what it taught me. Now, Shauna was deeply religious and one of the most positively spiritual people I have ever met. If you asked her how she got to where she was, she would probably tell you that it was God's will and how grateful she was for everything he had given her. Me, I see it a little bit differently. In every job she took, every fan she interacted with, every coworker she talked to, Shauna brought her full self. She gave without thinking and put people above everything else. She was a role model to everyone around her just by being herself. Interaction by interaction, she built herself a reputation for being an absolute joy to be around and a perfect professional. In 2010, Shauna met my dear friend Lynn Barsh, who was a fan of Shauna's from the Firefly days. Lynn was hoping she could get her hooked up with some of the projects they had going on at the time, but that didn't pan out. 9 years later, however, Lynn was one of the people in the room when they found out that they would need a new costume designer for season 2 of The Mandalorian. Well, that's easy, Lynn told them. You need to meet Shauna. When she got the interview, Shauna called a random fan she had met decades ago, hi, for research advice. Then she studied her ass off for 5 straight days so that she would be sure to be prepared for the interview to come. And when John and Dave called around for references, everyone they talked to sang Shauna's praises. Showrunners from TV shows she'd done, directors from her indie movies, people she had met through the least likely projects. They all loved working with Shauna and were more than happy to tell people about it. She told me at one point that they asked her to please stop having her people call and tell them nice things about her. She already had the job. I love that anecdote. It all played out like Lloyd Alexander's book, The High King, or I guess a little like Mandalorian Season 1, where our hero roams the kingdom, building trust and kinship with everyone they meet. Then in the final chapter, they all heed the call and come to the hero's aid. Shauna was just such a good person through and through. She was a master of her craft, pouring all of her love and talent and energy into every project she worked on. And it's that reputation that got her in the door, got her the job, and earned her an immortal place in Star Wars history. And when she got the job, Shauna did not slow down, not one bit. I really wish I could have gotten the conversation and the details on film, but Shauna told me once about how she reinvented the way that Lucasfilm does costume design on the Star Wars shows. Initially, the costume department was supposed to have a small portion of one of the warehouses, but Shauna had bigger ideas. She wrote up a proposal, using the old Pinewood studios from the original films as an example, to take over the whole warehouse and create a persistent costume shop that could serve multiple shows at once. Instead of bringing in costumers and crafters just on short contracts for every individual show, she wanted to give them a much more stable employment and bring them into the union. For Shauna, it wasn't just about making pretty costumes and getting a paycheck. She had her eye on the wider picture, to create an environment where everyone on her staff was excited to come to work every day because they knew they were making a real contribution to something amazing and that their boss had their back and all of their best interests at heart. I'm so grateful that Shauna lived long enough to see the Ahsoka series air, so she got to see how much the fans loved the series and all of her costume designs. I think the 501st lost their minds when they saw the new Stormtroopers. She was so excited for con season to start so she could see what everybody would do with it on the cosplay floor. And she was super excited to announce her new upcoming project, which would have brought even more Star Wars costume lore to the fans. I really hope they still go through with that project with somebody else at the helm, so that dream can still be realized. So I won't say anything more about that other than the fact that y'all would have loved it. But Shawna's true legacy was not the television and the movie stuff. It was her kids. When I met them, Sarah was a tiny little newborn, and Joseph was this rambunctious little 2-year-old who had just ripped new holes into Kaylee's parasol. Now Joseph is this giant Wookiee-sized 20-year-old, and Sarah has more fashion sense than even her mother, and the patience to spend her 18th birthday at Galaxy's Edge with her mom, even though Sarah could not care less about Star Wars. I haven't gotten to spend nearly as much time with those kids as I would have liked to, living 400 miles away. But I can tell you, everything Shauna did, she did for those kids. They were the world to her. I am insanely proud of who they both have decided to become, and I can't wait to see what's in their future. That said, my heart breaks all over again imagining what they're going through right now. I was 40 years old when I lost my mom and had to deal with the chaos of trying to plan a funeral and sort through an estate, and all while grieving the loss of someone you love so much. I cannot imagine doing that at 18 and 20. A friend of Shauna's has set up a GoFundMe to help the kids make it through that transition. If anything Shauna has ever done has touched your life in any way, I'm begging you, please do what you can to help these kids get a little bit of a nest egg so that they don't have to worry about money and where the next mortgage payment is coming from while they're going through their grief. Shauna can't do it, so it's our turn. And if you ever have a chance to hire Joseph Trpcic or Sarah Trpcic, my God, do not pass up that chance. They are their mother's children. You will never regret that decision. If you're really lucky, you'll get to meet a handful of people like Shauna in your lifetime. You'll recognize them by how they make you feel about yourself, by how they inspire you to be a slightly better version of yourself every time you see them. I feel extremely grateful for the chance to have gotten to know Shauna. I cherish every minute that we got to spend together and everything that she did for my family and for me. And I know that she knew the same for me because we told each other all the time how much of a difference we'd each made in each other's life. Please do the same to the people in your life. Life is way too damn short, and you can't tell them when it's too late. I love you, Shauna. I miss you.
Take me out into the black. Tell 'em I ain't coming back. Burn the land and boil the sea. You can't take the sky from me.